Imagine a society where the smoke alarms in every single building have been intentionally dismantled, right? Like while the city is actively on fire.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the flames are spreading, the structural beams are weakening, but residents are legally forbidden from alerting each other. And meanwhile, the building managers are on this loudspeaker insisting that, the temperature's perfectly fine and anyone who coughs is an agent of a foreign enemy.
I mean, it's a vivid, honestly terrifying scenario.
Right.
But as a metaphor for an authoritarian state operating without a free press, it really captures the existential danger perfectly. Yeah. It's not just about, a lack of information. It's about a manufactured inability to survive.
Exactly. And that's our mission for this deep dive. We're exploring the life and death mechanics of a free press in a functional democracy.
Yeah.
And we're bypassing all the abstract theory, taking a hyper-specific look at this through the lens of a potential political transition in Iran.
Which is such a complex case study.
It really is. So to do this, we've pulled from a massive stack of sources today. We've got historical analyses, global data from VDEM, human rights reports, and some really recent journalism on digital authoritarianism.
It's a fascinating cross-section, honestly, because it forces us to look at how these information networks are, how they're built, destroyed, and completely weaponized.
Right. And really quickly, before we get into the actual mechanics of this, a quick note for you listening. Our sources today dig into some highly charged political realities regarding both Iran's current government and various opposition movements.
Very charged.
Yeah, and we are entirely impartial here. We aren't endorsing any specific political viewpoints, opposition charters, or government policies. We are simply unpacking the fascinating ideas and facts contained in these original texts to help you understand the broader picture.
Because when you look past the rhetoric, the underlying data tells a very clear story about human survival.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's jump right into that survival aspect. We hear the term public good thrown around a lot regarding the press.
Sure, yeah.
But the sources highlight research by Nobel laureate Amartya Sen that takes this totally out of the realm of political science and puts it into stark life or death terms. He looked at the history of famines.
Right, and this is one of the most compelling findings in modern economics, frankly. Sen found a staggering correlation. Basically, no substantial famine has ever occurred in a functioning independent democracy with a free press.
Right, never.
Never. He contrasted British India, which suffered horrific, catastrophic famines, with post-independence India. Once India established a multi-party democracy and an independent press, the major famines they simply stopped.
See, my initial instinct is to ask, well, how does a newspaper stop a drought?
Right.
But it's not about the weather. It's about the feedback loop of accountability.
Right.
Like if a crop fails and people start starving in an autocracy, the local governor covers it up.
Right.
So he doesn't look bad to the dictator.
Exactly. And the dictator covers it up so the regime doesn't look weak to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
But in a system with a free press, journalists report that crop failure immediately. The public gets outraged and politicians are forced to redirect resources and respond, or, they get voted out. The press acts as this early warning system that literally forces the government to govern.
And let me push back a little here. Having a couple of rogue newspapers can't be enough to fix a whole country, right? Like, a journalist can't publish if a corrupt judge can just throw them in a black site. The broader ecosystem has to matter.
Oh, absolutely. And what's fascinating here is that the VDEM global data backs up your intuition completely.
Really?
Yeah, they measure democracy metrics worldwide, and their R-squared data shows you just cannot divorce the press from the rest of the institutional ecosystem. For instance, a free and diverse information environment has a massive 0.72 correlation with the presence of opposition parties in parliament.
Wow. Which means if you don't have political opposition fighting for power, any journalism you have is probably just state-sanctioned theater.
Precisely. And looking at your point about judges, there's a 0.66 correlation between free expression and lower court independence.
Okay, so it's a symbiotic relationship.
Totally. Journalists rely on independent judges to protect them from regime overreach, and the judges rely on journalists to expose political corruption that threatens the legal system. They basically prop each other up.
I noticed another wild correlation in the VDEM data, by the way.
Yeah.
A 0.83 correlation between a free press and strong climate governance.
Right. It sounds disconnected at first, but think about the mechanism.
Okay.
Environmental degradation like illegal logging, toxic dumping, water mismanagement, that stuff is usually highly profitable for someone connected to the state.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. Independent journalism is the only mechanism that allows the public to scrutinize those shadowy deals. Without that scrutiny, governments just, well, they let the rivers burn.
So if that's the pristine, interconnected democratic theory, how does a country actually apply that? Like, how do you build that ecosystem? Especially a place like Iran, which, according to the sources, has been in a tug-of-war over this for over a century.
Yeah, the history is intense.
To understand the ruins of their current media landscape, we really have to look at how it was built.
You really have to look back to the 1800s to see the pattern. The history of Iranian media is essentially this cycle of brief, explosive periods of liberalization followed by incredibly harsh, suffocating crackdowns.
Right.
It starts in 1837 with Mirza Saleh Shirazi publishing the first paper. But, that was really just a state project to broadcast royal decisions.
It wasn't real journalism.
No, not really. To find the roots of true independent Iranian journalism, you actually have to look outside the borders.
Right. I remember the sources talking about this. The early dissenting papers were smuggled in. You had Akhtar printing in Istanbul and Kanun printing in London in the late 1800s. It's basically the 19th century version of using a VPN to bypass the firewall.
It really was, and those smuggled ideas fueled an incredible boom during the constitutional revolution of 1906 to 1908.
Right, when things opened up.
Yeah, once the royal monopoly fractured, the society just exploded with expression. Over 90 newspapers flourished almost overnight. You had merchants, clerics, intellectuals all forming this unlikely coalition, using the press to demand a parliament and an end to absolute autocracy.
Wow.
There was even a prominent socialist paper called Iran Now.
It sounds like this vibrant, chaotic, golden era.
It was.
But it didn't last.
No, it was incredibly fragile because the institutional roots just weren't deep enough. By the time the Pahlavi dynasty consolidated power in 1921, they realized a free press was a threat to their modernization project.
So they crushed it.
Basically, they absorbed it. The press was neutered and turned into a top-down tool for state-mandated modernization.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the 1979 revolution. Because Ayatollah Khomeini famously used smuggled cassette tapes to bypass the Shah's censorship network, right?
He did.
It was this brilliant subversion of state media. But once the Islamic Republic took over, they didn't dismantle the censorship apparatus. They just rewired it for themselves.
They hardwired it into the very foundation of the state. The new constitution explicitly mandated that the media must serve Islamic culture and the revolutionary course.
Wow.
Yeah. The state broadcaster, the IRAB, was enshrined as the sole legal television and radio broadcaster. The monopoly wasn't just some policy, it was a constitutional imperative to ensure mass communication only served the theocratic establishment.
But I mean, did the press ever get another window of freedom after 1979? There was a crack in the armor later on, right?
Yes, the reformist window under President Mohammad Khatami starting in 1997. The sources describe this massive surge of publishing licenses. Suddenly, there was this vibrant, reform-oriented press asking real hard questions.
But again, it didn't last.
No, and that era is a tragic case study in why that VDEM data about independent courts matters so much. You had this explosion of journalistic bravery, but because Iran lacked an independent judiciary to protect it, the conservative establishment simply used the courts as a weapon. The judiciary launched massive crackdowns, shutting down dozens of papers literally overnight and jailing the journalists. It proved that, you can have all the brave reporters in the world, but if the broader legal system is controlled by autocrats, media freedom is just a temporary illusion.
So what does this all mean? Like, if you crush every independent voice and funnel everything through a state broadcaster that's mandated to run propaganda, eventually the audience is going to notice, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And the sources paint a picture of the state broadcaster, the IRB, being in an absolute terminal crisis right now.
The internal collapse of credibility is just staggering. The data shows public trust in the IRB has cratered to roughly 24%.
Wait, and the viewership?
Actual viewership is reported below 12%.
That is insane.
Yeah.
A monopoly with a captive audience, and 88% of the country refuses to watch it.
Yeah.
That's not just a ratings problem. It's a massive legitimacy crisis.
Yeah.
And my absolute favorite detail from the sources is that the employees know it too.
Right.
Like after the mass protests in January 2026, the internal revolt at the IRIB got so bad that human resources and security units had to issue formal warnings against feigned illness and staff absenteeism.
It really highlights the sheer absurdity of authoritarian bureaucracy. I mean, imagine being the middle manager forced to write a memo telling the news division to stop pretending to have the flu so they don't have to broadcast state lies.
It's darkly hilarious.
It is.
Yeah.
But when you lose control of your own staff, you have to rely on increasingly extreme measures to maintain the narrative. The texts detail the state's heavy reliance on what they call a soft war strategy.
Okay, what's the actual mechanism of a soft war in this context?
It's the weaponization of the reporter. The sources highlight this grim phenomenon of the interrogator reporter.
Interrogator report.
Yeah. Figures like Amena Sadat Zabibulpour are cited. These aren't journalists. They are literal extensions of the intelligence apparatus. Their job is to produce forced confessions from dissidents and broadcast them to justify state violence.
Wow.
They frame grassroots economic protests as these sophisticated foreign plots, just to give the regime an excuse to crack down.
Okay, but let me push back on the digital blackouts here. Let me play devil's advocate on the regime's strategy. We know the government routinely shuts down the internet during protests. They did it during the Woman Life Freedom movement, right?
Right, massive blackouts.
To stop citizens from coordinating. But if you cut the fiber optic cables, the screen goes black for everyone. So how does the regime's own propaganda survive? Nobody can see the interrogator reporter if the internet is turned off.
And that's where the modern censorship playbook gets truly insidious. They don't just pull the plug anymore. They've engineered a two-tier internet.
So they splinter the reality.
Exactly. Ordinary citizens are trapped in a digital blackout. They are cut off from global platforms, which stops them from organizing on the streets or, uploading videos of human rights abuses to the outside world.
Right.
But these state-aligned media outlets like Press TV and Tasnim News Agency, they're given special infrastructure. They use state-approved VPNs, dedicated digital tunnels, and what are called white SIMs.
Wait, white SIMs, what are those?
They are special SIM cards that inherently bypass the national firewall. This allows the state apparatus to keep publishing their narrative on platforms like Telegram and Twitter.
Oh my God.
Yeah, communicating with loyalists and the international community while the actual citizens of the country are locked in a dark room.
It's a terrifyingly efficient way to control the timeline of events.
Yeah.
But, here's the logical next step. If the state media only has 12% viewership and the domestic internet is just this walled garden of propaganda, millions of Iranians still need to know what's happening outside their window. They have to be getting their news from somewhere.
Right. And they turn to the diaspora. Millions rely heavily on foreign-funded Persian-language outlets operating in Europe and the U.S.
Like which ones?
Networks like Iran International, Minoto TV, BBC Persian, Voice of America, they beam information over the firewall via satellite and proxy servers.
Okay, but the sources bring up a really sharp critique of this dynamic from sociologist Chala Chafik and journalist Amir Mossadegh Khatouzian. They argue these diaspora outlets suffer from a massive double standard. And here's where it gets really interesting. I love the analogy they use in the text.
The tiger one.
Yes. They say these networks act like roaring tigers against the Iranian state, but turn into silent Persian cats when dealing with the opposition.
It's a brilliant way to describe a very, very dangerous journalistic failure, because when these outlets cover the regime's abuses, they are fierce and relentless.
Sure.
But when they interview opposition figures living comfortably in Western capitals, they drop their journalistic standards entirely. They throw softballs and fail to demand any transparency or practical roadmaps.
But wait, my instinct is to say, so what? Isn't any alternative better than state-controlled propaganda? If the regime is torturing dissidents and running interrogator reporters, shouldn't we give the diaspora media a pass if they're a little too friendly with the people trying to overthrow that regime?
I mean, it's a completely understandable instinct, but it's catastrophic for the long-term health of a society. The sources use the term goal displacement.
Goal displacement.
Yeah. When a news organization decides its primary goal is regime change rather than reporting objective truth, the entire methodology of journalism rots. They stop fact-checking, they start pulling raw, unverified rumors off anonymous Telegram channels just because it makes the regime look bad.
And by doing that, they boost what the text called the daydreaming of the opposition outside Iran.
Yeah.
They essentially create an echo chamber.
Exactly.
And if you're an activist inside Iran, risking your life based on an unverified rumor broadcast from London, the consequences are fatal.
You've hit on the exact structural danger. It completely damages the opposition's own credibility. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this diaspora dynamic poses a massive challenge for any potential political transition.
All right.
Let's assume the authoritarian regime actually falls. How on earth do you build a credible domestic free press from scratch when your landscape is fractured between discredited state propagandists who lie for the regime and partisan diaspora media who abandon fact-checking to fight the regime?
It sounds like a vacuum just waiting to be exploited. And intuitively, I always assume that if you just remove the dictator, the press naturally fixes itself.
Right.
Like, people want to speak, so they will. But the sources point to Iraq in 2003 as proof that that assumption is totally wrong.
Iraq is the ultimate cautionary tale for transitional media. In April 2003, the Ba'athist regime fell. Iraq went from having 5 tightly controlled, suffocating government newspapers to hundreds of new outlets seemingly overnight. It was an unparalleled media free-for-all.
Which, I mean, sounds like freedom of speech in its purest form.
On paper, sure. But freedom without a robust institutional framework isn't democracy, it's just a void. And in Iraq, that void was immediately bought up by sectarian factions, foreign intelligence agencies, and military interests. Because there was no unified, trusted national media institution to anchor the truth, these partisan outlets just mushroomed. They didn't practice journalism, they practiced information warfare against rival factions, deepening societal divides and actively fueling the civil conflict.
So how does a post-transition, or, any country escaping autocracy, avoid the Iraqi mistake? How do you engineer a transition that actually holds?
It requires meticulous legal and constitutional engineering before the transition even finishes. You can't just lift the bans on newspapers and hope for the best.
Right.
You have to actively hunt down and repeal the restrictive laws that enabled the censorship. Take Article 24 of the current Iranian constitution. It says the press is free except when it is detrimental to the fundamental principles of Islam.
That's the catch-all. That vague, sweeping language is exactly the loophole a corrupt judge uses to declare an investigation into embezzlement detrimental to Islam and throw the reporter in prison.
Exactly. You have to rip that language out by the roots. The sources bring up the 2011 Tunisian revolution as a much better blueprint.
What do they do differently?
The Tunisians didn't just fire the head censor, they abolished the Ministry of Information entirely. And crucially, they brought human rights defenders directly into the constitutional drafting rooms to ensure freedom of expression was locked in as an unassailable human right, not a conditional privilege.
And we are seeing echoes of that structural focus in the current proposal circulating among the Iranian opposition. And again, strictly analyzing these as theoretical blueprints, like the sources look at frameworks like the Massa Charter and Mariam Ravi's 10-point plan.
Yeah, and when you strip away the politics and look at the legal mechanics of those texts, the focus is heavily on institutional restructuring. They explicitly call for universal suffrage, a secular republic, and disbanding the IRGC.
Which is vital, because the IRGC controls vast swaths of the telecommunications and media infrastructure.
Precisely. They are trying to draft the legal architecture required to prevent that Iraqi vacuum we talked about.
Okay, so if you successfully dismantle the state broadcaster, the IRAB, what actually replaces it? Because you still need a way to talk to the whole country.
The gold standard, according to transitional justice experts, is transforming state media into public service media.
What's the difference?
It's a massive distinction. State media serves the government in power. Public service media serves the citizens. To survive, it has to be institutionally independent, shielded by that independent judiciary we talked about earlier, and economically sustainable so a sectarian militia can't just buy it out.
This brings us to the core of why you, listening right now, should care about the mechanics of this transition, even if you don't live anywhere near the Middle East.
Right.
Like, why does this blueprint matter globally?
Because the architecture of digital authoritarianism is a highly lucrative export.
That's exactly it. Iran's playbook, splintering the internet, isolating citizens with white SIMs, using forced confessions to muddy the waters, surviving crises of legitimacy by fundamentally altering the digital reality. It's being beta tested right now.
Yeah.
And if it works, if a regime can crush a massive grassroots movement simply by dismantling the digital public square, autocrats from around the globe are going to buy that exact software and copy that exact blueprint. The fight to establish a free press in Iran is literally the front line for digital liberty everywhere.
And, that leads to a really profound challenge that goes entirely beyond what traditional transitional frameworks prepare us for.
Oh, what's the blind spot?
Well, the historical models like Iraq or Tunisia focus heavily on rebuilding institutions and combating traditional state propaganda. But let's look forward. Imagine a post-conflict society, like a future Iran, trying to hold truth commissions. They are trying to establish a shared, objective national history to heal the wounds of the past. What happens to that fragile, nascent dialogue when the newly freed media landscape is immediately flooded with hyper-realistic AI-generated deepfakes?
Oh, wow. So you finally rip up Article 24, you finally get the free press and the open internet, but the content flooding the zone is entirely manipulated by bad actors using AI.
Yeah.
It completely bypasses the censors and targets the psychology of the audience directly.
Exactly. If the goal of transitional justice is truth and reconciliation, how does a traumatized society agree on the basic facts of who committed which atrocities when seeing is no longer believing? It is a structural threat that no previous democratic transition has ever had to survive.
That is a chilling thought. If information is the public good that saves lives, AI disinformation is like deliberately poisoning the reservoir just as the pipes are finally unclogged.
Yeah.
It brings us right back to the smoke alarms. A free press isn't just a luxury. It is the alarm system of a healthy society. When it's dismantled, the fire doesn't stop. You just lose the ability to organize the bucket line. And when that alarm is finally rewired, you have to be absolutely certain you can trust the sound it makes.
Well said.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the narratives, keep digging into the mechanics, and never take a free press for granted.